But first, another set of classified documents have been found at Biden's home in Delaware. This now makes 20 documents that have been found. Joining us this morning, our reporter for the Daily Caller, Brianna Lyman, and Project 21 National Advisory Board member and radio host, Christopher Arps. Happy Monday to you. Brianna, when President Biden goes to that home, there is no visitor log. Why not?
That's a great question. That's what everybody's asking. That's what House Republicans want to know, and it's what Americans deserve to know. Listen, prior to the documents being found there, Joe Biden visits that place very often. I don't think there was necessarily a case to know who was there. But now that we know there were top secret classified documents left at this location, where his son, Hunter Biden, who I hate to say it, but was a crackhead, you don't know who he has coming in and coming out. We need to know who was there and who had access to those documents, and not just at Biden's garage, also at the University of Pennsylvania, that think tank who is being funded by the Chinese, propaganda machine. We need to know who had access there.
And sticking with the Hunter Biden topic, Chris, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson got into quite a heated exchange with NBC's Chuck Todd over the president's son's dealings and media bias. Take a listen.
You invite me on to argue with me. I'm just trying to lay out the facts that certainly Senator Grass and I uncovered. They were suppressed. They were censored. They interfered in the 2020 election. Conservatives understand that. Unfortunately, liberals in the media don't. And that's part of the things that part of the reasons our politics are inflamed is we do not have an unbiased media. We don't. It's unfortunate. I'm all for a free press. Well, it needs to be more unbiased.
Senator,
there's misinformation on both sides, but the censorship and suppression
we're trying to do issues here in
from the left.
Partisan cable. Look, you can go back on your partisan cable cocoon and talk about media bias all you want. I understand it's part of your identity.
Wow. I remember I was watching that with my husband yesterday, and my jaw was probably on the floor. I said, we're going to be talking about this today. Chris, your reaction.
Yeah, I actually watched that yesterday. As we know, Senator Ron Johnson is not a darling of the liberal media. Every time that he runs for re-election, he is supposedly vulnerable, but he ends up, pulling out these elections. So he's not a fan he's not a fan. I also found it really surprising when Chuck Todd said yesterday that he was a journalist in that exchange, which is particularly funny as well. Look, Hunter Biden is a target. He should be a target. If you remember,
I think we're having some trouble there with your audio, Chris. So let's move on to Brianna just to continue. Yes.
Yeah, Brianna, I wanted just to get your take on this because, as Chris said, Chuck Todd said, I'm a journalist here. But you know what? Kudos to Ron Johnson for going on the liberal media, and I'm seeing a lot more Republicans do that. I think they need to do that to get their message out. But what do you make of that exchange there?
Well, like Chris said, this is a man who calls himself a journalist, but he's attacking Ron Johnson with partisan political points. And speaking of Republicans, we've seen Matt Gaetz, for instance, go on these liberal outlets ever since, the whole speaker debacle happened. So I do think it's nice to see Republicans, including Dan Crenshaw, go on these liberal news media outlets and reach an audience that they don't normally and typically reach. I also think it says a lot if we've noticed the way that, and you've spoken about this earlier, but the way that the media has been covering, for instance, the whole Biden document scandal. I mean, CBS especially, you heard just the other day during their 3 o'clock hour, you heard the two hosts say, Karine Jean-Pierre hasn't been transparent. You had Ed O'Keefe literally sparring with Karine Jean-Pierre Wednesday in the briefing room, and she even had to say, we're friends, don't do this. We don't have to have a confrontation. So it is nice to see a change in the media in the new year. So I guess it's new year, new media.
Well said, Brianna. And speaking about that transparency that you mentioned with White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, here's the moment where she specifically said the search for classified documents is over. Now, that was on Thursday. Take a listen.
That search was completed last night, and now this is in the hands of the Justice Department. So look, I want to be very prudent here, as I said yesterday, as you all have reported over and over again. About any questions about this, any specifics, there's a review going on, and I would refer to Department of Justice or my colleagues in the counsel's office. But again, I'm just not going to go beyond what the president said. We just laid out the process that was taken.
Yeah, Chris, obviously the search was not over, considering, as you said before earlier, there's that ongoing drip, drip, drip. So it seems that not only the White House is struggling with transparency, but it seems that somehow, whether it's the lawyers or whomever is now doing these searches, isn't doing a very good job, considering one day it's one document and then 6, and then it keeps going and going.
Which makes you very suspicious.
Very.
Is this a sabotage effort in order to damage President Joe Biden's 2024 prospects? As I said earlier, I find it very curious that these documents have been found weeks before Jim Jordan is to conduct a investigation, into Hunter Biden's business dealings. A lot of people could say that this is a drip drip to get Joe Biden out of there. If you remember, after the 20 midterm elections, a lot of people weren't happy with him, but since there wasn't a red wave, they decided to stick with him. I think this is the Democratic Party leaders trying to get Joe Biden out of there and do it early enough so that they can have a replacement besides Kamala Harris.
Yeah, the timing is so interesting. And Brianna, I'm thinking, okay, if they found these documents, these classified documents in November, then they didn't find another set until December. Don't you think if they found them in one location, especially after what happened with former President Trump, the council would say, let's go to every location and make sure there are no other classified documents? I don't know if they did that. This timing is all very suspicious. But Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock was asked why the White House did not mention this to the American people back in November, just days before the midterms. Take a listen.
Do you think the White House knew about this back in November, even before the midterms? Do you think that they should have told us about this earlier?
I'm glad to see that the president and his administration are cooperating. And they should continue to cooperate. Nobody's above the law. And we need to get to the bottom of this so we don't see this kind of thing happen again.
But should they have told us about it in November? I mean, there's some Republicans are alleging cover-up. Even some Democrats have expressed some concern.
Well, look, the Justice Department is engaged in the investigation.
All right, Brianna, good for ABC for pushing back on that. But he dodged the question. He didn't answer the question.
Yeah, and I think that he tiptoed around the question because I think he probably does believe that the White House should have been transparent on November 2nd. But he can't say that because then the Democratic machine will come after him. So he has to be very careful with his words. But we have seen White House reporters from several organizations, including Newsmax, asked just on Friday, why wasn't the White House transparent with this? And I think it bodes really poorly for the administration that has declared themselves one of truth and transparency to provide neither of those things. And, you just mentioned before, Katrina, you said that it went from one document to 6. You had Karine Jean-Pierre say that they found one document, and suddenly, days later, they actually said, actually, it was 6. Don't tell me they didn't know it was 6 documents. They're, like Chris said, drip, 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 little bits of information, but they're still hiding stuff from us, even as all this information comes out. And I do have to say, why did it come out so late? Because they want to delegitimize anything that comes out of the weaponization of the federal government committee. They want to say that everything that conservatives said about conspiracy theories, it was just a conspiracy theory run amok. The Justice Department does not target conservatives, and they had to wait to throw the media a bone.
Yeah, good point.
And
Go ahead.
one thing that I find very curious, too, is during the Trump situation, the National Archives knew that there were documents missing. It seems to me during this Biden episode, the National Archives didn't even know that these documents were missing. It seemed like presidential loyalists would have said, hey, I didn't see anything in this box. We'll put it away. And then all of a sudden we find these documents after Joe Biden is out of office or no longer president. Right. The fact that they divulged these documents without the National Archive even knowing about it in light of an investigation that Jim Jordan is going to conduct, I just find very suspicious.
We will definitely see what comes of this investigation. Brianna Lyman, Christopher Arps, stick around. We've got a lot more to talk about after the break. Stay with us.